I was sitting in my favorite rocking chair, wrapped in a soft quilt, looking out over the garden I had meticulously cared for over the past few decades. The sun was beginning to dip behind the hills, casting long shadows across the fields. The wind whispered through the trees, the sound of rustling leaves bringing an odd sense of peace to my heart. I'd spent 39 years alone, each day blending into the next, with only the occasional phone call or letter from him to break up the monotony. My name is Mary O'Hara, and for as long as I can remember, I had been married to a man who was as much a part of me as my own soul. But for 39 years I had lived without him. It was 1984 when James, my husband, a decorated soldier, was sent to Africa for a peacekeeping mission. At the time I was a young woman, full of life and promise, ready to stand by his side through anything. I thought he would return in a few short months, but that was not to be. Over the years I received letters, brief updates, and fleeting glimpses of his life through photos and occasional calls. But then, suddenly the messages stopped coming. The letters went silent. The calls stopped. The uncertainty grew, and so did my pain. People told me to move on. They said I had to let go, but how could I? How could I let go of the man who had been my everything? My heart ached every time I saw a family, every time I heard a wedding anniversary being celebrated. It was a constant reminder of the love that had once been so vibrant, so real. And then, one cold autumn day, nearly 40 years later, the phone rang. It was a call I had never expected, a call that would forever change my life. "Mary, this is Captain Reeves from the U.S. Army," he said, his voice steady but distant. "I have some news about your husband." My heart skipped a beat. I had always feared this call. I had feared hearing the words that would confirm what I had been dreading for so long. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "He's coming home," Captain Reeves said. Froze. What? My mind raced to catch up with the suddenness of his words. After nearly 4 decades, my husband was coming home. I didn't know what to feel. Part of me wanted to leap out of my chair and scream with joy, but another part of me was paralyzed with doubt and fear. What had changed? Why was he returning now? "Are you still there, ma'am?" Captain Reeves asked, breaking through my thoughts. I cleared my throat, trying to push away the emotions swirling inside me. Yes, I'm here." "What happened? Why now?" There was a long pause before he spoke again. "It's a complicated story, but he's been discharged and will be arriving tomorrow morning." He's different, Mary. "He's not the same man who left all those years ago." The words hung in the air like a storm cloud, and my mind began to race with questions. What did he mean by different? Had something happened to James in Africa? Was he injured? Mentally scarred? Or was he coming back to a world he no longer understood? As Captain Reeves continued to explain the logistics of James' return, I felt a knot tightening in my stomach. I was excited, yes, but also afraid. How could I possibly prepare myself for the man who had been gone for so long? The phone call ended abruptly, and I sat there, staring at the receiver, trying to make sense of everything. The past 39 years of my life had been shaped by the absence of the man I loved, and now he was coming home. But not the same. I stood up slowly, my old bones creaking with the effort. The house felt empty in a way it never had before. The walls, the floors, even the furniture seemed to wait in silence for the change that was about to come. I walked toward the window, staring out into the fading daylight, my mind spinning with 1,000 possibilities. What would he look like? Would he still recognize me? Would I recognize him? Tomorrow the world would change. And as I watched the sun set on that cool autumn evening, I couldn't shake the feeling that the man who returned to me after all these years would bring with him more than just memories. He would bring a past I had no part in, and the future. I had no idea what that would hold. The next morning I woke up early, too restless to sleep. The house seemed to echo with a quiet tension, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. My mind kept replaying Captain Reeves' words. "He's different, Mary." What did that even mean? I made myself a cup of tea and sat at the kitchen table, looking out at the driveway. It felt like I was waiting for a ghost or perhaps a stranger to arrive. My hands trembled slightly as I sipped the hot liquid, trying to calm my nerves. Then, heard it. A car engine rumbled down the road, growing louder with each passing second. My heart began to race. This was it. The moment I had been waiting for and fearing for nearly 4 decades. I stood up, my legs unsteady beneath me. I could feel the tension in the air, as if everything was about to shift. The front door creaked as I opened it, and I stepped outside, the cool breeze brushing against my face. There, at the end of the driveway, was a military jeep. My breath caught in my throat as it slowly came to a stop. The door opened, and a tall, broad-shouldered man stepped out. He was wearing military fatigues, his face hidden by sunglasses and a cap. For a moment, I stood frozen, my mind racing, trying to process the sight of him. The man turned toward me, and I felt a chill run down my spine. As he took off his sunglasses, my heart skipped a beat. It was him. But it wasn't. James was standing in front of me, but the man before me was not the man I had married. His eyes were tired, haunted. His once dark hair had turned salt and pepper, and his face, while still handsome, was lined with years of experiences I couldn't even begin to imagine. I swallowed hard, my throat tight. The man who had left me all those years ago had returned, but the man before me was a stranger. Mary. His voice was soft, broken, as if he hadn't spoken in years. I'm home. And with that, everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and time came crashing down. I was about to learn just how much had changed in the years he had been gone, and how much of my own world had shifted without me even knowing. As I reached out to hug him, my mind raced with questions and fears. What had happened to him in Africa? What was the story behind his return? And, most importantly, how would I face the reality of a man who had been gone for nearly 40 years? Stay tuned to see how Mary will navigate this emotional reunion, and whether her husband is the man she once knew. The door closed behind James with a soft thud, and for a moment, the world seemed to stand still. I stood there, frozen, unsure of what to do next. My heart was pounding, my breath shallow. There he was, the man I had waited for, but now that he was standing before me, I wasn't sure who he was anymore. James looked around the room, his eyes scanning the familiar walls of the home that had once been filled with laughter and warmth. The silence between us was deafening. I wanted to reach out, to touch him, to hold him and feel his arms around me, but there was a distance between us that I couldn't bridge. It was as if the years had woven an invisible barrier I wasn't sure how to break. You look different, I said quietly, my voice barely above a whisper. The words felt strange as they left my lips. What else was there to say? How do you greet someone who has been absent for nearly 4 decades? James gave me a small, tight smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. I guess I do, he replied, his voice rough, like he hadn't spoken in a long time. I'm sorry, Mary, for everything. My heart sank. What did he mean by that? What had happened to him? What was he apologizing for? I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to rush forward, to take him in my arms and make everything feel normal again. But another part of me was terrified. I could see the change in his eyes, the haunted look that hadn't been there before. It was as if the man I had once known had been replaced by a stranger, someone whose experiences had left deep scars. He walked slowly toward the living room and sat down in his old armchair, the one he used to sit in every evening after work. The chair creaked under his weight, just like it always had. But this time it felt different. I felt the weight of the years between us, the emptiness of the space that used to be filled with his presence. I stood by the doorway, unsure of what to do. Part of me wanted to rush to him, to fill the silence with the comfort of my touch. But another part of me was hesitant, uncertain of how to bridge the gap that had formed between us. You've been gone for so long, I said, my voice trembling slightly. I don't know where to begin. James looked up at me, his eyes full of sadness. I know. I don't know where to begin either. I don't know how to fix what's broken, Mary. I'm not the man who left all those years ago. My breath caught in my throat. His words were like a punch to the gut. What had happened to him? What had changed him so much that he felt like a different person? I thought about you every day, he continued, his voice thick with emotion. I thought about our life together, about the house we built, the future we were supposed to have. But I wasn't strong enough to come back. I wasn't strong enough to face you. I didn't know how to live up to the man you deserved. I felt a lump form in my throat. I didn't know what to say. There was so much I wanted to ask him, but the words wouldn't come. How had he been living all these years? What had he seen? What had he been through? The questions swirled in my mind, but I couldn't bring myself to ask. I wasn't sure I was ready to hear the answers. Instead, I walked over to the window and stared out at the garden. The flowers were in full bloom, just as they always were this time of year. The world outside looked the same, but everything inside felt different. The man who had left me all those years ago was not the same man standing in the room with me now. I don't know if I'm ready to hear your story, James, I said quietly, my voice trembling with the weight of the past. I don't know if I can handle it. He stood up slowly, his eyes filled with regret. I don't expect you to understand, Mary. But I need you to know that I never stopped loving you. I never stopped thinking about you, even when I was in the darkest places. I just couldn't come back. Not until now. His words were like a balm to my aching heart, but they also made the pain of his absence feel even sharper. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that the man I had once loved was still inside the stranger before me. But the truth was, I didn't know if I could ever go back to the life we once had. Too much time had passed and too many things had changed. I turned away from the window and looked at him. The man I had waited for, the man who had been gone for so long, was standing before me, but I still didn't know him. Not the way I once did. What happened to you, James? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. What happened in Africa? What changed you? He closed his eyes for a moment, his face tightening with emotion. I wish I could tell you, Mary. But some things are better left unsaid. Not because I want to keep them from you, but because I don't want to hurt you with the truth. I shook my head, confusion swirling inside me. I didn't know what to believe. I didn't know what to feel. The silence between us was thick with unspoken words. I could feel the weight of the years pressing down on both of us, and I didn't know how to escape it. And then, just as the silence was about to swallow us whole, the doorbell rang. I froze, my heart skipping a beat. Who could that be? Why was someone at the door now, when everything felt so fragile? Stay tuned to find out who has come to visit, and whether this new arrival will bring more answers, or more questions. The doorbell rang again, its shrill sound slicing through the thick silence in the room. My heart pounded in my chest as I turned to James, whose face had drained of color. He stood frozen, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. Who could that be? I asked, my voice shaky with the uncertainty of the moment. The air around us felt electric, charged with unspoken tension. James didn't answer immediately. His eyes darted toward the door, and I could see the unease in his gaze. It was as if the ringing doorbell had summoned something he hadn't expected, something that was about to change everything. I'll get it, I said, trying to shake off the heavy feeling that had settled in my stomach. I didn't know what to expect anymore. First, the call that my husband was returning after nearly 40 years, and now this unexpected visitor. My mind raced, my thoughts scattered like leaves in a storm. I walked slowly toward the door, my heart still racing. As I reached for the handle, I glanced back at James. His face was tense, his lips pressed into a thin line as if he were holding something back, something important. Taking a deep breath, I opened the door. Standing there on the other side was a man I didn't recognize. He was tall, with sharp features and a cold, calculating look in his eyes. His hair was dark, neatly combed, and he wore a well-tailored suit, as though he had just stepped out of a boardroom meeting rather than a casual visit. "Can I help you?" asked, my voice wary. The man's presence sent a chill through me, but there was something else. A familiarity in his posture, in the way he stood that made me feel as though I had seen him before. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Is James O'Hara here?" "I'm here to speak with him." The name hit me like a ton of bricks. James O'Hara. Before I could respond, I glanced back at James, who had walked up behind me, his face pale. He didn't speak. He just stood there. His eyes locked on the stranger as though he had seen a ghost. His mouth opened and closed a few times, but no words came out. The man stepped forward, brushing past me with an almost rehearsed ease. He didn't wait for an invitation. He seemed to know exactly where he was going, as if he had been here before. "James," the man said, his voice low but firm. "It's been a long time." James flinched. What are you doing here?" His words were shaky, unsure, as though he were trying to process the man's presence. "How did you find me?" The man didn't answer immediately. Instead, he turned and faced me for the first time. His eyes cold and calculating. "Who is this?" he asked, his voice devoid of any warmth. "I'm Mary, his wife," I replied, my heart beating faster with each passing second. The stranger's gaze flickered back to James, and I saw the tension in his face tighten, as though something unsaid was simmering beneath the surface. The man ignored my question, focusing entirely on James. "You've been gone a long time, James. You didn't think you could just leave everything behind, did you? You didn't think we would forget, did you?" James took a step back, his breath coming in short, shallow bursts. "I didn't leave anyone behind. I had no choice. You don't understand. I couldn't come back." The man's expression hardened. "I think you'll find we're well beyond understanding now, James. You made your bed, and now you'll lie in it. There's no running from this anymore." The words hung in the air like a thunderstorm on the horizon, charged with a kind of tension that made the walls feel as though they were closing in on us. I felt a cold sweat break out across my forehead. What was going on? Who was this man, and why did his words feel like a threat? "You're going to regret this," James muttered, his voice low but full of anger and fear. "You don't know what you're getting into." The man didn't flinch. In fact, he stepped closer, his presence towering over James like a shadow. "I know exactly what I'm getting into, James. And I know exactly how to handle it." I took a step back, my heart racing as I watched the confrontation unfold before me. This wasn't just a casual visit. This was something much bigger, something I couldn't comprehend. The stranger turned to leave, but not before he fixed his gaze on me one last time. "I'll be in touch," he said, his tone dripping with warning. "You can't hide from the past forever, James." The door slammed shut behind him, and for a moment the house was silent again, save for the sound of my own breathing. I stood frozen, my mind struggling to catch up with the chaos that had just unfolded. James didn't move. He stood there, staring at the door, his body tense with a mixture of anger and dread. What did he mean by that? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. James ran a hand through his salt and pepper hair, the weight of the moment sinking in. "I don't know," he said quietly, almost to himself. "But I fear it's not over yet. That man. He knows things about me. Things I can't escape." I felt a cold chill run through me. Who was this man, and what had he done to James all those years ago? What was it that he was threatening to bring back into their lives? As the door closed behind him, I realized that this was only the beginning of a story I wasn't sure I was ready to hear. As James turned away from the door, I could see the fear in his eyes. But what was he afraid of? And why was the stranger so determined to dig up the past? Stay tuned to see how deep this rabbit hole goes and what secrets James is hiding from me. The room felt suffocating as I stood in the silence that followed the stranger's visit. James hadn't moved since he turned away from the door. His back hunched slightly as if the weight of something unbearable had settled onto his shoulders. I watched him, unable to speak, my thoughts a whirlwind of confusion and fear. What had just happened? And why did it feel as if the stranger's visit was only the beginning of something much darker? I walked toward James, my footsteps heavy in the quiet house. The air between us felt thick with unspoken words. I wanted to reach out to him to comfort him, but there was something in his demeanor, something guarded, that made it impossible for me to do so. "James," I said softly, my voice trembling. "What's going on? Who was that man? And why did he say all those things?" James didn't answer at first. He just stood there, staring out the window, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. His face was a mask of sorrow, his eyes distant, as though he were lost in memories I couldn't touch. "He's someone from my past," James said finally, his voice strained. "A man I thought I'd left behind." I waited, hoping he would say more, but he didn't. I could feel the distance between us growing with each passing second, like an invisible wall that was being built between us. I needed answers, but James seemed unwilling or perhaps unable to give them. "What happened, James? You owe me that much," I pressed, stepping closer to him. He flinched at my words, as though they had struck him harder than I intended. "I don't owe you anything, Mary," he said, his voice sharp, but then softened when he saw the hurt in my eyes. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean that. I don't know how to explain." I took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm of emotions inside me. "You can start by telling me who that man was, and why he thinks he has the power to come here and threaten us." James turned to face me, his eyes filled with guilt and fear. "His name is Robert Sinclair. He's someone I was involved with a long time ago. Someone I should have never crossed paths with. But I did. And now he's here to collect." "Collect what?" I asked, my heart pounding in my chest. The fear that had been creeping up on me for the past few minutes began to swell. What kind of man was this, and what was he after? James sighed, rubbing his temples as if trying to banish the memories that were clearly haunting him. "Robert and we made some very bad decisions together, Mary. Decisions I regret deeply. But they're part of my past, and now he's come to collect on a debt that I can't pay. I was lost. Debt. What kind of debt could a man like James have accrued that would bring someone like Robert Sinclair to our doorstep after all these years?" "James, you're scaring me," I said, my voice shaking. "What kind of debt are we talking about?" James finally met my eyes, and for the first time, I saw a vulnerability in him that I hadn't seen before. "It's not something I can explain easily, Mary. It's not something I ever wanted you to know about. But I don't have a choice anymore. Robert. He's a dangerous man. He's been involved in things I should have never gotten involved in. And now he's here to make me pay for it." My mind raced as I tried to process his words. A dangerous man. Robert Sinclair wasn't just a name. He was a threat, and somehow my husband was entangled in his web. The man I had waited for, the man who had been gone for so long, had a past I could never have imagined. And it was one that had returned to claim him. "What are we supposed to do now?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "How can we get out of this?" James looked down, his shoulders slumping as if the weight of his past was too much to carry. "I don't know. I've spent the last 40 years trying to forget it, trying to bury it all. But Robert, he's relentless. And now he's not just after me. He's after everything we've built. Our home, our lives." "You." My stomach twisted with fear. This wasn't just about James anymore. This was about us. Our life together. My future. And I had no idea how to stop it. "Is there anyone we can talk to? Anyone who can help us?" I asked desperately, my heart hammering in my chest. James shook his head. "I don't know. I don't think there's anyone who can help. This is something I have to face on my own." The words cut through me like a knife. James had always been my protector, the man I could turn to in times of trouble. But now it seemed that he was the one who needed saving, and I was powerless to help him. The room was quiet again, the weight of James' words pressing down on both of us. I didn't know how to fix this, how to make everything right again. All I knew was that our peaceful life, the life I had imagined would be so different, was on the brink of falling apart. Just then there was a soft knock on the door. Froze. Another visitor. Who could it be now? James' face hardened, and his eyes darted toward the door. "It's him," he muttered under his breath. Before I could respond, he walked toward the door, his steps heavy with the burden of the past. I followed behind him, my heart racing with dread. When he opened the door, there stood Robert Sinclair, a smirk on his face. He wasn't alone. Behind him stood two men, both dressed in dark suits, their faces as cold as stone. What does Robert Sinclair want now? And who are these men with him? Stay tuned to find out if James can face his past, or if this is the end of the life we've built. Robert Sinclair's smirk was the first thing that struck me as the door swung open. He stood there, confident and unbothered, as though he were strolling into an old friend's house instead of a place filled with the anxiety and fear I was trying to suppress. His cold eyes scanned over James and then shifted to me, as if inspecting me, sizing me up in a way that made my skin crawl. "You didn't think you could run forever, did you?" Robert said, his voice smooth like silk, but with an edge that sent chills down my spine. "The past always catches up, James. And now it's time to pay the piper." James stepped back, his face contorting with a mix of anger and fear. "You need to leave, Robert. This has nothing to do with her. This is between you and me." Robert raised an eyebrow, clearly amused by James' defiance. He glanced back at the two men standing behind him. Both of them were tall, intimidating, with faces devoid of any emotion. They seemed like silent enforcers. No words needed, only actions. I took a step forward, my voice shaking but firm. "What do you want from us? Why are you here?" Robert turned his attention to me, his smirk growing wider. "Ah, so now we're concerned about the lady, aren't we? Well, Mary, let me put it simply for you. What I want is the price for a deal that your husband made long ago. A price he's refused to pay. A price that's long overdue." I looked at James, the confusion and worry building in my chest. A deal? What kind of deal? What had James done that had brought this man to our door, threatening not just him but me as well? James stood silent for a moment, as if weighing his options, but it was clear that the weight of the past was too heavy for him to keep carrying any longer. He sighed deeply, the years of tension and regret lining his features. "Mary," James began, but his voice faltered. He looked at me, and I could see the guilt in his eyes. "There's no easy way to say this. Robert's right. I made a deal. Terrible deal. One that I thought I could walk away from, but I can't. Not anymore." Robert chuckled darkly, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. He strolled past James, making himself at home in our living room as if he belonged there. "You didn't think I'd forget, did you, James? You thought you could hide in your little corner of the world, live out your days in peace, and leave me to pick up the mess. Well, I'm here now, and I've come for what's mine." "What's yours?" I asked, my voice rising with disbelief. "What could you possibly want that's ours?" Robert turned toward me, his expression hardening. "You'll understand soon enough. But for now, let's just say that James owes me more than just money. A debt far worse than you can imagine. And now I'm here to collect." I shook my head, feeling the room close in around me. "What do you mean? What kind of debt?" My voice cracked with frustration, the flood of questions overwhelming me. James lowered his gaze, his face pale, as though the truth was a weight he had been carrying for far too long. "I worked with Robert years ago. In Africa. There were things we did, things I can never undo. Robert's business was not the kind of business a man like me should have been involved in. But I was. And when I tried to get out, he didn't let me. Now he's here to collect." "Collect?" I whispered, my heart sinking as the pieces started to fall into place. "What are you talking about?" Robert's eyes gleamed, pleased with the confusion that had settled in the room. He could see that his words were having the desired effect. It's not just about money, Mary. It's about power, influence. There are deals, there are favors that need to be repaid. James and I crossed lines, and when I needed him, he bailed. But he can't hide from this anymore. Not now. I felt the floor beneath me shift as if the very ground was being pulled out from under me. The weight of Robert's words, the secrets that James had kept from me for so long, were more than I could bear. For 39 years, I had lived in the shadow of uncertainty, but now it was all coming to a head. And you think you can just walk in here and take whatever you want? I demanded, my voice louder now. You've already taken everything from him. What more do you want? Robert smirked, unfazed by my anger. You don't understand, Mary. This was never about taking anything from James. It's about keeping him in line, making sure he doesn't forget where he came from. And now that I'm here, there's nothing he can do to change it. I turned to James, the man who had been my world for so long, and yet felt like a stranger now. What's going on, James? I asked, my voice shaking. What happened in Africa? What kind of man were you? What have you done? James looked at me, his eyes filled with regret and pain. I wish I could tell you everything, Mary. But some things are better left buried. He paused, his voice breaking. But I owe you the truth. I couldn't live with the lies anymore. Not after everything that's happened. Before he could continue, Robert raised his hand, silencing him. Enough of this, Robert said, his tone hardening. It's time, James. I'm done waiting. You've had your chance to make things right, but now I'm taking what's mine. And I'm starting with your home. James looked at me, his face a mixture of sorrow and guilt. I'm so sorry, Mary. I never meant for any of this to happen. I wanted to protect you. But now it's too late. As Robert's men moved to seize control of our home, the truth of James' past came crashing down on me. What had he done? What was Robert going to take from us next? Stay tuned as the fight for our future, and our very lives, begins. I stood frozen, my mind spinning with the truth that had been slowly unraveling in front of me. The man I had spent my life with, the man I had waited for, had kept a secret so dark, so powerful, that it had shaped everything we had, everything I believed, into something I couldn't recognize. And now this man, Robert Sinclair, had come to collect. I felt the air grow heavy, thick with tension and uncertainty, as the two enforcers moved toward James. I wanted to scream, to fight, but my body wouldn't obey. Fear had rooted me to the spot. James stood there, his face a mask of helplessness, watching as Robert's men began to move with cold, methodical precision. They walked toward the furniture, toward the things we had built together over the years, the things I thought were ours, the life I thought was safe. Now it was all slipping away like sand through my fingers. James, I whispered, my voice breaking, what have we done to deserve this? James didn't respond immediately. He couldn't. His eyes were locked on Robert, the man who had been both a partner and a predator. The years had twisted James into someone I didn't recognize. Mary, James finally said, his voice low, almost as if speaking to himself. I can't protect you from this. I wish I could. But I can't. I shook my head, feeling as though the ground beneath me had been ripped out. What do you mean? You have to protect me. You're my husband. We've spent our lives together. Robert's cold laughter filled the room, the sound sending shivers down my spine. Oh, Mary, you're deluding yourself. This man, your husband, isn't the man you think he is. He's a liar, a betrayer. And he's been running from his debts for far too long. The words hit me like a physical blow, my heart aching at the truth in Robert's words. I looked at James, his face pale, but his eyes were filled with regret. But they were also filled with something else. Fear. James, you have to tell me what happened. I demanded, my voice rising with desperation. What are they talking about? What have you done? James stepped forward, his hands raised in defeat. I didn't want you to know, Mary. I didn't want to burden you with this. But now you have to understand. Robert and we were involved in illegal arms trading. In Africa. It was a deal I thought would be quick, easy. But it spiraled out of control. The words hung in the air, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. The man I had married, the man I had waited for all these years, was not the man I thought he was. He had been a part of something so dangerous, so corrupt that it could destroy us. Illegal arms trading. I repeated, my mind struggling to process the reality of what he was saying. You were involved in that? James nodded slowly, his face drawn, his eyes pained. Yes, I thought I could walk away. I thought I could leave it behind me. But Robert, he doesn't let people walk away. He's the one who controls everything. Robert stepped closer, his smile widening as he saw the shock on my face. You see, Mary, he said, his tone condescending. James and I made a pact that binds us. And now he owes me. He owes me in more ways than one. But he didn't want you to know, did he? He wanted to protect you from the truth. But the truth always comes out, eventually. I felt my knees go weak, and I collapsed into a nearby chair, my mind racing to catch up with the whirlwind of lies and secrets that had just been exposed. How had I missed this? How had I been so blind? Is this why you couldn't come home, James? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Because of this. Because of what you did. James looked at me, his face filled with sorrow. Yes, I was ashamed. I didn't want you to know. I thought I could protect you from it all, but I couldn't. I couldn't protect myself, let alone you. Robert's men moved around the room, taking their time, as though they were surveying our lives like a prize they had finally won. They were marking everything, taking everything, and there was nothing we could do to stop them. James had built a life with me, and now it was being torn apart by the past. Robert turned to me, his face suddenly cold and serious. You still don't understand, do you, Mary? This is more than just about James. This is about power, about control. And you, he pointed at me sharply. You're a part of it, whether you like it or not. I stood up, my legs shaky, but my resolve hardening. I won't let you destroy our lives, Robert. You think you can just walk in here, take what you want, and leave? I won't let you. I won't. Robert laughed, his expression mocking. You think you can stop me, Mary? You think you have the power to change anything? I stepped toward him, my chest rising and falling with anger. I don't need to stop you, Robert. I just need to make sure you don't win. Not this time. I turned to James, my heart breaking for the man I had once known. James, tell me what to do. How do we get out of this? What do we need to do? James hesitated for a moment, then looked at Robert. His shoulders slumped, and I saw the weight of the past finally take its toll on him. I've spent my life running from this, Mary. But I can't run anymore. If we want to get out of this, I have to make things right with Robert. It's the only way. I felt the crushing weight of his words. How? I whispered, a tear slipping down my cheek. James took a deep breath, his voice steady but full of regret. I have to give him what he wants. And you have to stay out of it. What does James mean by giving Robert what he wants? What price will they pay for their past mistakes? Stay tuned to find out if Mary and James can ever escape the clutches of Robert Sinclair and rebuild their shattered lives. The silence that followed James' words was suffocating, the weight of his confession heavy in the air. My mind reeled, trying to piece together the puzzle of James' past, a past filled with dangerous dealings, lies, and a debt that had come back to haunt us. Robert's presence in our home was the final straw, the tipping point that would either break us completely or force us to confront the reality of the man I had loved for so long. I don't want to be part of this, James, I whispered, my voice trembling. I don't want to be part of your debt. I didn't ask for this. James stepped closer to me, his eyes filled with a mixture of guilt and desperation. I know, Mary. I know you didn't. But this is the only way we can fix this. It's the only way I can make things right. The words didn't comfort me. They only added to the weight in my chest. I didn't want to live in a world where our love was built on secrets and debts. I didn't want to have to pay a price for something I had never known about, something that wasn't mine to pay. James, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. You don't have to do this alone. You never have to carry this burden alone. I'm here. We'll figure this out together. But his eyes, those eyes that had once been full of warmth and love, were now clouded with regret. I don't want you involved in this, Mary. This is my mess. I'm the one who has to fix it. Before I could respond, Robert's voice cut through the tension. Enough of this. We don't have time for emotional speeches, James. You've kept me waiting long enough. I turned to face Robert, my fists clenched at my sides. What do you want, Robert? What will it take for you to leave us alone? Robert smiled coldly, his eyes glinting with malicious intent. It's simple, Mary. I want what's owed to me. You've been living in a fantasy world where you think your husband can just walk away from his past. But he can't. No one can. Not in my world. I could feel the walls closing in, the suffocating reality of our situation pressing against me. There was no escaping it. There was no running from the past anymore. James had been right. Robert had a hold over us, over him, and there was nothing we could do to change that. But I couldn't give up. I couldn't just accept that our lives were about to be torn apart by something neither of us could control. I'm not giving up, I said firmly, looking at James. We're not giving up. We'll find a way to stop this. James looked at me, his expression a mixture of admiration and sadness. I wish it were that simple, Mary. But this man, Robert, has everything. And he's not going to stop until he gets what he wants. I turned to Robert, my eyes narrowing. What is it you want, Robert? What is it going to take for you to leave us alone? Robert's smile widened and he stepped closer to us, his presence imposing. You're not in control here, Mary. You never were. James has to pay the price for the things he's done. And you, well, you'll just have to watch. The words stung, each one laced with cruelty, but they also lit a fire inside me. I wasn't going to let him win. Not like this. Not without a fight. I turned back to James, my resolve hardening. We'll fight him, James. We'll fight for our future. James looked at me, his eyes filled with a complex mix of love and regret. Mary, you don't understand. You're in danger. If you get involved in this, you'll become a target too. You don't want that. But I had already made up my mind. I won't let you face this alone. We'll figure it out. We'll find a way to end this once and for all. Robert chuckled, his voice cold and mocking. You're both so naive. You think you can just walk away from this, don't you? You think you can just pick up the pieces and move on. But that's not how this works. You can't outrun the past, no matter how hard you try. I turned back to him, my voice steady but firm. I'm not running, Robert. I'm standing my ground. And you can't take everything from us. Robert's eyes flickered with something that almost looked like surprise. He hadn't expected this fight. He hadn't expected me to stand up to him. But I wasn't about to let him have the last word. I wasn't about to let him destroy everything we had worked for. James, I said softly, turning back to my husband. We don't have to let him win. James looked at me for a long moment, his gaze filled with a mix of admiration and sorrow. You don't know what you're saying, Mary. This is bigger than both of us. But I wasn't afraid anymore. I couldn't be. For the first time in my life, I understood that the only way forward was to face this head-on. There was no running, no hiding, no turning back. We had to confront our past, and we had to do it together. Then we'll face it together, I said, taking his hand in mine. We'll figure this out. And we'll win. Robert watched us, his expression darkening, but I saw a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. He hadn't expected us to fight back. He hadn't expected us to stand up to him. Then you'll regret it, Robert said, his voice low and dangerous. You'll both regret it. With that, he turned and walked toward the door, his men following behind him. I watched as they left, the sound of the door closing behind them echoing in my mind. It was over for now, but I knew this was only the beginning. Robert wouldn't leave us alone. And we couldn't rest until we had figured out how to stop him. As the door closed behind Robert and his men, I knew we had a long road ahead of us. What had we just stepped into? And how much would we have to sacrifice to stop Robert from destroying everything? Stay tuned to find out if Mary and James can finally put an end to Robert's reign of terror, or if their past will come back to haunt them forever. The door slammed shut behind Robert and his men, and for a moment the house fell silent, as though the world was holding its breath. I stood there in the middle of the living room, still holding James' hand, both of us shaken by the confrontation that had just unfolded before us. My heart was pounding in my chest, the adrenaline still coursing through my veins, and my mind was reeling with the weight of everything we had just learned. James let out a shaky breath and slowly pulled his hand from mine, as though the contact had become too much for him to bear. He walked to the window, staring out into the garden, his expression distant. I could see the burden of the past weighing heavily on his shoulders, and for the first time, I truly understood how deeply Robert Sinclair's presence had affected him. But it wasn't just the past that haunted James. It was the future too. A future that was now uncertain. "James," I whispered, walking toward him slowly. "We can't just let him control us like this. We need to take back control." He turned to face me, his face etched with regret and fear. "Mary, I don't think you understand what you're asking. This isn't something we can fix by just trying harder. Robert doesn't play fair. He's dangerous, and there's no telling how far he'll go to make us pay for what we've done." I looked at him, my chest tightening with the overwhelming weight of his words. I knew Robert was dangerous, but I couldn't accept that this was the end. I couldn't accept that the past had the power to control us forever. "I don't care how dangerous he is," I said, my voice steady, despite the fear that still lingered in my heart. "We can't let him win. We've been running from our pasts for too long. It's time we take a stand." James shook his head, looking at me as if I were asking him to do the impossible. "You don't know what you're asking, Mary. You don't know the lengths Robert is willing to go to. I've seen what he's capable of. And he'll stop at nothing to make sure I pay for what I did." I stepped closer to him, placing my hand gently on his arm. "I don't care what it takes. We're in this together, James. And I won't let him tear us apart." There was a long pause, the tension between us thick and suffocating. I could see the doubt in his eyes, the years of pain and regret that had built up inside him. But there was something else there too. Flicker of hope. A glimmer of the man I had once loved, the man I still loved, despite everything that had come to light. "You're right," James finally said, his voice quiet but filled with determination. "We can't keep running. If we're going to face this, we have to do it together. No more secrets." I nodded, feeling a sense of relief wash over me. For the first time in what felt like forever, I felt like we were finally on the same page. We were going to face Robert, and we were going to fight back. "Let's figure this out," I said, my voice filled with resolve. "We'll find a way to end this. Once and for all." James looked at me, his face softening. "I don't know if we can ever undo what's been done, Mary. But I'm willing to try. For you. For us." With that, a new sense of purpose settled between us. The past had caught up with us, but it didn't have to define us. We still had a chance to take back control of our lives. Together. But as we stood there, the weight of the battle ahead pressing down on us, a knock on the door interrupted the moment. I froze, my heart skipping a beat. Had Robert returned already? James stepped forward, his face tense, his hand hovering over the doorknob. He glanced at me, his expression grim. "Stay behind me," he whispered. I nodded, my pulse quickening. This wasn't over. We had barely begun to confront the storm that was coming for us. James opened the door slowly, and standing there on the other side was a man I hadn't expected to see. Captain Reeves, the same man who had called to inform me of James' return. His face was serious, but there was something else in his eyes, something urgent. "James," Captain Reeves said, his voice low and tight. "I need to talk to you. It's about Robert Sinclair." I looked at James, confused, but he didn't hesitate. He stepped aside, letting Captain Reeves enter the house. The moment the door closed behind him, Captain Reeves wasted no time. "I didn't want to get you involved in this, but it's worse than I thought," Captain Reeves said, his voice urgent. "Robert isn't just here for you. He's targeting everything you've built. Your home, your reputation, and Mary. He's already made moves to bring you both down. I'm here to help you, but you need to listen to me." James's face paled, and I could see the concern in his eyes as he turned to Captain Reeves. "What do you mean? What's happening?" Captain Reeves glanced at me, his eyes briefly meeting mine before he spoke again. "Robert's not just some businessman, James. He's connected to something much larger, much more dangerous than we thought. He's tied to illegal arms trafficking, money laundering, and a network of people who don't take kindly to being crossed. He's been working on a plan to take down your entire life, to destroy everything you've ever worked for." I felt my stomach twist with the realization of how deep Robert's reach was. This wasn't just about money or power, it was about survival. And if we didn't act fast, we might not make it out of this alive. What does Captain Reeves know that could help James and Mary stop Robert once and for all? And what will happen if they fail? Stay tuned to find out if they can turn the tide against Robert's dangerous network, or if their fight for survival will cost them everything. Captain Reeves' words hung in the air like a heavy fog, the weight of his revelation pressing down on me. Robert Sinclair, the man who had walked into our home and threatened everything we loved, wasn't just a businessman with a vendetta. He was connected to a network that reached far beyond what we could ever have imagined. A network that could destroy us without a second thought. I could see the worry etched on James' face, and for the first time since his return, I saw the fear of a man who had no idea how to fight back. It wasn't just about facing Robert anymore. It was about surviving the storm that was coming for us. And I could feel it closing in. "We don't have much time," Captain Reeves said, his voice low and urgent. "Robert's making his move. And if we don't act now, it's over. He's already planted people close to you. He knows everything about your life, James. He's been watching you, waiting for this moment." James' fists clenched at his sides, the muscles in his jaw tightening as he struggled to control his anger. "I can't let him destroy everything. Not again." "You're not alone in this," Captain Reeves said, stepping closer to James. "I've been working undercover for months to gather intel on Robert's operation. I knew it was bigger than it seemed, but I didn't know how deep it went. The people he's working with, they'll do anything to protect their empire. And they'll come after you with everything they've got." I watched James' face, his expression hardening as the full reality of the situation began to sink in. He wasn't just up against Robert anymore. He was up against a dangerous network of criminals with the power to ruin our lives. "Tell me what we need to do," James said, his voice steady, but there was an edge of desperation beneath it. "What's the plan?" Captain Reeves didn't hesitate. "We need to take down Robert and his operation from the inside. We can't just keep playing defense. We need to go on the offensive. The best way to stop Robert is to destroy his network. If we can bring down his key players, we take away his power." James nodded, but I could see the doubt in his eyes. "And how do we do that? We don't have the resources to take on an organization like this." "We're not alone," Captain Reeves replied, his voice firm. "I've got people on the inside. We have a small team that's ready to help. But it's going to be dangerous. We'll have to move quickly and quietly, before Robert realizes what we're doing." My heart was pounding in my chest, the fear that had been simmering beneath the surface suddenly coming to the forefront. I had lived through so much. Decades of uncertainty, of waiting for James to return, of trying to build a life without him. But now I was facing something far bigger than anything I had imagined. The world we were living in was about to explode, and we had no choice but to fight back. "I'm in," I said, my voice steady, despite the fear that was twisting inside me. "We'll do whatever it takes." James turned to me, His eyes filled with a mixture of concern and determination. "Mary, you don't have to." "No," I interrupted, my voice stronger now. "This is our fight. We're in this together." James hesitated, his gaze lingering on me before he nodded. "All right. Together." Captain Reeves stepped back, his expression hardening. "Then we move quickly. Robert won't waste any time making his next move. We need to act now before he has the chance to strike." For the next few hours we made a plan. Captain Reeves outlined the steps we would take to infiltrate Robert's operation and dismantle it piece by piece. He had contacts, intel, and a small team that could help us, but it was clear that the road ahead would be dangerous. Every move we made had to be calculated, every step had to be precise. One mistake and we would be exposed. As the night wore on, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were standing on the edge of something we couldn't control. The life I had built with James was being torn apart by a past I had never known, and now we were both on the run. We weren't just fighting for survival, we were fighting for everything we had worked for, everything we had left. The clock was ticking. We didn't have much time. "I'll handle the team," Captain Reeves said, breaking me from my thoughts. "You two focus on getting your house in order. Pack up what you can and be ready to move when I say. We don't know when Robert will make his next move, but it's coming. Fast." James and I exchanged a glance, both of us knowing what this meant. We couldn't stay here any longer. Our home, everything we had built together, was no longer safe. The threat was real, and we had to move quickly if we wanted any chance of surviving. James walked over to the window, his eyes scanning the empty street outside, his face tense. "I never thought it would come to this," he said softly. "I never thought the past would catch up to us like this." I walked over to him, placing a hand on his arm. "The past has a way of doing that. But we have a chance to take control. To make it right." He turned to face me, his eyes softening. "I don't deserve you, Mary. After everything I've done, you still want to fight with me." I shook my head, my heart swelling with love and determination. "You don't have to deserve me, James. We're in this together, and we'll make it through this. I believe in you." He smiled faintly, his hand reaching out to take mine. "Thank you," he whispered. "I don't know what I'd do without you." We stood there in the quiet of our home, knowing that everything was about to change. The past was coming for us, but we weren't going down without a fight. Together we would face whatever came next. And then, just as the tension began to settle, the doorbell rang again. Who is at the door now? Is it Robert coming to finish what he started? Or is it someone else with more bad news? Stay tuned to find out if James and Mary's fight against Robert's dangerous empire will push them to the edge, or if they'll be able to outsmart their enemy before it's too late. The doorbell rang again, its sound jarring in the otherwise tense silence of the room. My heart skipped a beat as I glanced toward James, who was already moving toward the door. His body tense, his face shadowed with worry. It seemed like the walls of our home, once a safe haven, had now become the battleground of our darkest fears. I could see the conflict in his eyes as he reached the door, unsure of whether to open it or not. The clock was ticking, and every second felt like a lifetime. I couldn't help but wonder if it was Robert returning to finish what he had started, or if it was someone else, someone even more dangerous. "James," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "What if it's him? What if he's here too?" "I know," James interrupted, his voice tight with unease. "But we can't hide forever, Mary." He paused before opening the door, taking a steadying breath as he prepared to face whatever, or whoever, was on the other side. I stood behind him, my hands trembling, my stomach a mess of nerves. I had never imagined a day like this. Our lives, once peaceful, had been upended by a past that James had tried to leave behind, and now we were trapped in a web spun by a man who would stop at nothing to get what he wanted. James finally opened the door, his face hardening as he was met by a figure I hadn't expected to see. It wasn't Robert. It wasn't even one of his men. Standing in front of us was a woman. Her blonde hair was pulled back into a tight bun, and her eyes were sharp, focused, as though she was constantly on alert. She wore a military-style jacket, and her posture was rigid, commanding. She looked like someone who had seen things most people couldn't even imagine. I froze as I looked at her, feeling an unfamiliar chill run through me. There was something about her, something that didn't sit right with me. "Who are you?" James asked, his voice cautious but controlled. The woman didn't hesitate. "I'm Agent Emily Clark," she said, her voice steady and professional. "I work with Captain Reeves. We need to talk. And we need to do it now." James glanced at me, his face filled with confusion. "Captain Reeves? What does he have to do with this?" Agent Clark stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. Her eyes scanned the room, taking in every detail, every movement, as though she were assessing the space for threats. "I know this is going to sound strange, but we've been monitoring Robert Sinclair for a long time. And we believe he's part of a much larger operation than anyone realized." I looked at James, my confusion deepening. What was she talking about? Robert was dangerous, yes, but had it really gone this far? Were they really suggesting there was a whole network we were up against? "I don't understand," James said, his voice rising with frustration. "We've already been through this. What more could you possibly know that we don't?" Agent Clark took a deep breath, her expression unwavering. "We've been tracking Sinclair's connections for years. But it's not just him. There's a whole underground network tied to international arms deals, money laundering and more. They've been operating under the radar, pulling the strings behind the scenes. And they've been targeting you, James. You're the key to something bigger than just the debt you owe Sinclair. He's not the only one after you." I felt my heart stop as her words sank in. This was more than just Robert. This was bigger, more dangerous than anything we had imagined. And now it was coming for us. For our lives. "Why haven't we been told about this sooner?" James demanded, his voice sharp with disbelief. "We've been working in the shadows, gathering information," Agent Clark replied, her eyes flicking between the two of us. "But now it's time for action. Robert is the link, but he's not the one pulling the strings. We need to move quickly if we're going to stop this before it consumes everything." She walked to the table and laid down a folder filled with documents. "This is everything we know about Robert Sinclair and his operation. But there's more. This is where it gets dangerous." James and I exchanged a look, our breath catching in our throats as the reality of what we were facing began to settle in. Robert wasn't the only threat. The network he was a part of was far more powerful, far more dangerous, than we could have ever imagined. "Your involvement in this, James, isn't a coincidence," Agent Clark continued. "You've been a part of something much larger than you realized. And now they're going to come for you, come for everything you've built. The only way to stop them is to take down the entire network. But we can't do it alone." She looked at both of us, her gaze steady and serious. "We need your help." I could feel the weight of her words pressing down on me, and for a moment I didn't know how to respond. Our lives had already been torn apart by secrets and lies, and now we were being asked to fight back against something far bigger than us. But as I looked at James, I saw the resolve in his eyes. This was our fight. We didn't have a choice anymore. The past had caught up with us, and we had to face it head-on. We had to stand together. "I'm in," James said, his voice steady with determination. "We'll help you. Whatever it takes." Agent Clark nodded, her expression softening for the first time. "Good. We don't have much time. Robert won't wait long. We need to move quickly if we're going to take him down." The gravity of the situation settled in, and I could feel the weight of the world on our shoulders. We had no choice but to fight. This wasn't just about us anymore. It was about everything we held dear. And as I looked at James, I knew one thing for sure. We were going to face this together. No matter what. With the stakes higher than ever. How will James and Mary take down Robert and the underground network threatening their lives? Stay tuned as they prepare for the battle of their lives. The final showdown is coming.